Hey, it's Alex Williams, the News Stack here at Pivotal's big event, Spring One Platform. And I'm here with Greg Bowen, CTO and Senior Vice President, Dell Digital at Dell.
Yeah.
How are you, Greg?
Fantastic. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Well, we've had a chance to chat earlier today, so this is a nice little follow-up, but I would love to hear about how you've been working with Pivotal over the years. Tell me about what Pivotal has done for a company like Dell, which really is much larger than people would understand. As you were telling me, they're in manufacturing, financial services. How has Pivotal started to affect the overall enterprise itself at Dell Technologies?
So I think one of the beautiful things about Pivotal, and that's from the Pivotal platform all the way to the Pivotal development methodologies, is there's an intense focus on the customer and how that focus can bring about fantastic business outcomes. And so Pivotal has allowed us to move from big functional siloed development where we were focusing projects. We get a program at the beginning of the year and the team would spend 6 to 9 to 12 months trying to develop that and maybe not meet the business needs that they were trying to achieve. What this methodology does is allows the teams to get extremely hyper-focused on the outcome with the business partner right there in the development process with us. And so that's allowed us to take the scale of an enterprise company and become almost startup in nature.
So how did you get started? When was that? What precipitated you calling Pivotal in?
Yeah, so when we brought Dell and EMC together 3 years ago, it was announced, we knew that we were going to have a problem with bringing two very large enterprise IT organizations together. And EMC had already started to adopt the Pivotal platform, and they were ahead of us. But they weren't working on some of the development methodologies. And we knew as we brought these two very large organizations together, we were going to have to do something very different in order to start achieving the simplification of the ecosystem and then getting back to a software development company. When we're supporting a $90+ billion business, every transaction comes through our systems, and those needed to be flexible and agile, scalable, and extremely stable. And Pivotal has allowed us to do all of that. So we brought them in about 2 years ago. We started small in our commerce platform, creating a balanced team where they were training us how to employ the development methodology, and then it's just grown from there.
So perhaps you could talk a little bit more in detail about the methodology itself.
Great. So the methodology really focuses on user-centered design and lean startup principles. And it's really about how to enable a product team to be as customer-focused, as efficient, and as low risk as possible. And so the team is made up of paired developers, usually 4 to 6 of them, a product manager, and a product designer. And they work with a business partner. So a stakeholder who can make decisions needs to be involved in the development process with you. And then they just teach you how to work from the customer backwards. So really do user interviews, user-focused design, be empathetic. It's another big tenet. You have to empathize with the user experience in order to understand and truly drive changes that are positive for the user. And so that's the basis of the methodology. Then it's taking the big monolithic programs that you used to do releases on a quarterly basis and breaking those down into much smaller releases, sometimes as little as a day, where you can actually write code starting with a test, get that test to pass, and deploy it to production in the same day. So your developers and your product team is actually seeing the results in near real time, and then the business can see that as well, and they can start making decisions on what's the next thing that the team needs to focus on in near real time.
So empathy is an interesting concept in developer circles now, and it's discussed a lot. What are some of the practices you developed to adopt that empathetic perspective, and how did you then present that to customer?
Yeah, so it's really about taking a listening approach. Historically, we would get a requirements document from the business, and they might see something on TechCrunch that was really cool, and it's like, oh, we need that feature on the website. And so we would get a document and a list of features, and we'd just start writing them. We wouldn't actually get into a practice of putting a potential design in front of a customer to get feedback. We wouldn't think about how it would impact the workflow that a customer was working on. And so some of the methodologies are actually, getting a small group of customers in the development lab with you and working on prototypes, looking at the actual flow that they take through a task, and then taking that feedback and making changes to the roadmap. We were talking earlier about Dell.com and how they had created a roadmap for a whole year based on nothing that the customer wanted. When they started developing the first feature and put it in front of customers in an MVP fashion, the customer didn't even have a need to use that feature. This was about gaming, and what we learned was gamers really care about frames per second. We wouldn't have learned that unless we talked to them. And so then we built a feature on the website that really shows them the different machines, the different laptops, and how many frames a second they provide for them. And that allows them to make the best choice of technology to meet their needs. So it's just an example of how we're using those practices of listening to customers to drive change.
So that listening has become a best practice then. And then through that, you have been able to go through your own transformation. How has that practice then helped transform your own organization and how you think about your teams and how you think about the workflows and the technologies you adopt?
The great thing about the development practice, this is focused on one small development team, but it can scale to a much bigger problem you're trying to solve. So we actually use the user-centered design and the empathy to talk to our own teams that are going through the process. When we started this, we were extremely rigid. It was going to be, you start in the morning with a stand-up, you code for 2 hours, you have a break, you code, you have lunch, you code again, break, and then you leave for work. What we found was the methodology is very flexible, and we had many different development styles and use cases that we needed to solve for. And so we applied the methodology, started talking to the development teams, is this working for you? And we learned that the labs methodology works very well for highly interactive development types. Dell.com, a sales tool where a sales maker is using it all day long. But there are some situations where they just need to be agile in the way they approach things. They might own a back-end service, and they might not need all of the user-centered design capabilities that Immersion does. So we created another training type that was well-suited for their methodology and their use cases. So it's really taking this and applying it at a higher level so you can really learn not only what the customer of your software is doing, but the people that are creating the software, how do we better meet their needs too? And that's allowed us to scale this out more.
So tell me then about who are on your teams now and how the teams have changed, since you started working with Pivotal.
Yeah, in the beginning, we would have a functional team of software developers, say 30 on a feature team, and they would get tasks assigned to them. They would write the tasks, move on to the next one. Today, we have small product teams, development, design, product management, but we also realized that we needed to bring in data science every once in a while, and we need to sometimes bring in analytical resources. And so the core team is the development, design, and product management, and then we have teams that support them with data science, AI, analytics, and they come in. And that's how we're organizing now, moving away from big functional silos to those small balanced teams. And then you have someone on the business that's responsible for making decisions, as we talked about, that is in that room in the development process with you.
How has it affected how you hire people?
Yeah. So when we take an approach like this, you have to find people that are collaborative in nature. Software development has historically been somewhat of an isolated, heads down, writing code. This is a much more collaborative environment. The teams sit together, they talk in real time about problem solving, and you have to find people that are well suited for that want to be collaborative in nature. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is what we've learned is talent is very hard to find, We have a lot of people internally that have the skills that would be successful, could be successful on one of these development teams. People that know how technology works, maybe been in project management, they could just have some boosting and augmentation of their skills. So we created an internal boot camp to teach people full stack software development. They already knew how the business works. They already knew how Dell worked. We just give them some more skills to be successful in that highly collaborative technical environment. And our first 60 that applied for it have gone through, did the 9-month program, and have all graduated. So 100% success rate is pretty cool. That's allowed us to augment and find talent internally as well as externally.
How does that affect your technology choices?
So it's great. You know, we get from the outside, we get people who might have been trained in some of the latest technology choices. From the inside, we understand what our ecosystem is and the technology standards we've used. And this coding academy, we've used an external source for us, so they're also training in some of the latest technology. So we get that blend of understanding our ecosystem as well as getting some of the input from external team members on what's latest and greatest. The great thing about the Pivotal platform, it does gives us some guardrails and some standards that abstract away some of the messy stuff in the infrastructure to give them a unified operating system. So that kind of gives us some guardrails as we bring on new technology in the environment as well.
How has this all affected your software delivery?
So yeah, as an IT organization, you really are focused on a couple things. And historically, it's stability, stability, stability. You're keeping as close to 100% uptime as you can because, let's face it, a manufacturing facility can never go down or we're going to miss customer promise. So what Pivotal and the Pivotal Labs methodology, it's allowed us to focus not only on stability, we're seeing a 47% reduction in user incidents and high severity incidents from teams that have adopted this, but we're also seeing teams be able to move faster, and their cycle time has been reduced by 20%. So they're both delivering faster and delivering with higher quality. So we're getting the best of both worlds.
Are you adopting new technology architectures such as container technologies and to kind of help with that development process and the workflows?
Yes, definitely. We've realized early on that we have a broad ecosystem of applications. Some of them were being native, built cloud native. Some of them are more greenfield applications. But we had a lot of legacy applications that would run much better in a container environment. So we also adopted a Pivotal Container Service to allow us to have both types of environments within our ecosystem.
And so for continuous delivery, what are you using?
So we use, the Pivotal platform as the base.
Right.
And we use GitLab as, a code repository and orchestration. There's some other things depending on some of the legacy. There's a little Jenkins in there and some Docker, but we're actually trying to simplify the ecosystem and move to a consistent CI/CD pipeline.
How has that changed your perception of risk?
So this allows us to tackle risk head on. Historically, when you're building in waterfall, you're generating more and more risk the longer the project goes on. Many of the requirements that you get in the beginning of the process may no longer make sense. The industry's changed, customer preferences changed, the business need changed. And you end up delivering something that might not have been what the business actually needed to achieve its outcomes. With this methodology, the Pivotal Labs methodology, we break those deliveries into much smaller pieces. And with much smaller delivery, you can take on a little bit more risk. So you can be, trying new things out, trying to innovate a little bit. And when you deploy in a blue-green environment, for instance, you can roll back quickly if there's issues. You can meteor it to allow only a few customers internally, for instance, to test the software in production before you go live. So it allows us to take on a lot of different risk mitigation strategies in order to get that quality that we've talked about.
What's an example that you can cite about the risks you have taken and what have been the outcomes of that?
Early on in this process, we knew that we needed to change search on our website. We had multiple services that were creating and providing our search service. And so as a customer, you might get strange results depending on which part of the website you were on, whether you're searching for products or say drivers and downloads. So we decided to use this methodology to improve search on our website. And this was with a 4-person team, 2 developers at the beginning, a designer, and a product manager. And within 3 months, they were able to deprecate old legacy search service, launch one that was taking live customer traffic for a top 5 website in the world. That's extremely fast from ideation to production. And they went live with absolutely 0 production defects. That's all driven by that ownership mentality. They knew they were going to own their code in production when they launched it, so they made sure that it was high quality before it ever got to the live site. So that's that speed and quality aspect again.
You also have to take consideration factors such as skills, don't you?
Definitely. Skills, we're trying to deploy some of the latest software languages, Spring, for instance. Coming to Spring 1 is always helpful to start getting your developers skilled up in new technologies. The boot camp is another one. And then hiring from the industry with the skills that you're wanting and vetting those before you bring them on. So that was definitely the case. But we also had to develop the design skills. People underestimate the importance of having product design within that team, and that's where you're really getting that customer empathy. You're being able to prototype before going live. And so that designer is an integral part of the team as well, and that's where we've had some of the challenge is getting from industry. So we're actually creating another product design boot camp to see if we can develop that skill internally as well.
Now we're moving into this new age. You've been through the process with Pivotal to learn about their methodology and start to institute it. And now here we are in 2019, going into early 2020, and Kubernetes has become, the norm essentially for container-based infrastructure, distributed architectures. Yeah. How do you keep that separate from the developers, and so they can continue with their workflows, and the Kubernetes architecture can really acting on your behalf to be able to then grow and take more risks and serve those customers?
Well, that's how we're building it into the platform and trying to abstract away some of the the inner workings from our customers, letting them work on the Pivotal platform and container service and all of that orchestration, kind of keeping that abstracted away from the developers. Part of the Dell Technologies cloud is being able to operate on a single operating platform and model. And we're starting to deploy that within our hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environment. And so Kubernetes is just built into the inner workings of the software, so they don't necessarily have to worry about all the orchestration that's required there.
So what have been some of the learnings? What are some of the key aspects of the journey that you look back upon and reflect upon how it will affect your direction going forward?
Yeah, the key thing is this isn't just a technology change. Oftentimes people think, I just need to get the latest and greatest technology. And so they procure it, deploy it into the data center, and realize that they're not getting the most out of it. What we've learned is this had to be a culture transformation. So we created the Dell Digital way. We knew we had to change our people into product teams and the way we organized them. We had to move from waterfall into a much more agile XP delivery methodology, and we had to deploy the Pivotal platform. Bringing all those 3 things together allowed us to create that culture change, which is really about an operating model change that gets closer to the business. We're not trying to optimize IT for the business. We're trying to make technology part of the business. And that's one of the biggest changes that we realized, just getting that cultural shift to stick.
So when you're reflecting again upon where you've come from and where you're going, are there any points in the journey that you thought about that makes you think we need to do things a little bit differently going forward? Because there's always those cuts in the road, those detours that you end up having to make that you're not realizing that you're having to make at the time. Then now that you, at a later point, realize, I don't have to do that again.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of walls that you run into and bang your head against when you're on a journey like this. because you're trying to do 3 of those things at once and keep the plate spinning. I think one of the biggest changes was we knew that what we found and we discovered by using the same methodology that we use for software development, that it wasn't a one-size-fits-all transformation. There were going to be different use cases that needed different types of methodologies, and we needed to meet the teams where they are, meaning we had to create different capabilities for different types of software development. And that was how teams started to get engaged. It wasn't resonating with them at first. This is really a strange way to work. When we started meeting them and listening to them, again, developing that empathy, it allowed us to get more people engaged and to make the transformation scale faster.
So now you're really just beginning this journey in many respects. What are some of the goals going forward? How will this methodology and the work that you've done be used to grow your influence into the larger Dell organization?
So we have a goal to get as many people using this methodology and as many of our applications on the technology, the Pivotal platform, as possible. We originally thought somewhere around 70% would be applicable. We think that's around 80% of our development teams can now operate in this way. And what we're seeing is it's starting to spread into the product teams as well. They're starting to adopt some of the Pivotal methodologies. The teams that are actually creating the next generation of infrastructure products for the market are starting to use the methodologies because they've seen the transformation that's going on internally within Dell Digital. So it's been a great way for us to spread that kind of that joy of software development again throughout the organization.
Well, Greg, congratulations on the journey that you've been taking with Dell Digital at Dell.
Thank you.
And look forward to hearing about your progress as you move forward.
Thank you. It's been great being here.